While Thing and Rhonda get ready to work on the court's pickups, I pay more attention to Lux and Freddy. I always find it interesting to listen to philosophy and how people think, but I'm also curious about how paladins actually work here. In the games I have played and run, paladins are lawful good, meaning they have an honour for agreements and are good. The problem is that a lot of people don't understand how that actually works, and end up playing lawful stupid instead. There's no shortage of horror stories about people playing paladins, and falling and being the only ones at the table confused about it. And there are also horror stories of people playing paladins, being deliberately set up to fall by their DM, setting up situations where law and good conflict, and then simply forcing the paladin to fall no matter what they do. But here I don't know the mechanics. Is falling even a thing? I don't know. But listening in, I might learn. And even if not, I'll at least get a good idea of what kind of philosophy I've accidentally been teaching my ratkin. I may not appreciate the situation I'm in with them, but I do want to make sure they're doing things right. The ratkin elder simply sits on his stool, looking somewhere between being lost in thought and remembering a joke. Freddy sits on his own stool and fidgets as the silence drags on. So, how do we start? Asks the young orc, and Lux finally focuses on him with a smile. Grander question than I think you realize, he says with a chuckle, but mercifully continues quickly. That's what I was thinking on, actually. There's a lot of things we could start with, and while beginning at the beginning is usually a good idea, I think it might drag on a bit, Freddy simply nods and Lux continues. We could compare writings and have a long-winded talk about people who are well known for how long their wins are, but there's a bit of wisdom Lord Thedium has given, and I think your shield understands it as well. Words are noise, actions are change. I've heard the voice say this in many ways, and I've seen the truth of it myself. So let me ask you this, young Freddy. Why did the consecration of the cemetery go as it did? Freddy looks confused. What? Lux smiles with a twinkle in his eyes. Why did the consecration of the cemetery go as it did? Talk and think your way through it, lad. There was much more happening than a couple of acolytes and an old rat. The orc doesn't look very confident, but Lux hasn't led him astray yet. Why, He takes a few more seconds to get his mind into gear, then starts. At the beginning? Well, High Priest Torlon said we should go consecrate it, and sent the head acolyte at the time to oversee it. Good. Why? Prods Lux. And Freddy frowns as he actually thinks about the why of the mission, instead of just doing as asked. Because the shield wanted it consecrated? It doesn't like undead, so that makes sense, right? And it's pretty plain why it wouldn't like undead, right? I mean, Thedium's undead aren't bad, and Miss Yvonne is a special case, but most undead are just mindless destroyers. Lux nods, glad Freddy is thinking things through now, and motions for him to continue. Okay, otherwise, why send me? I was one of the people who's delved in here the most and part of the church, so I could give advice and stuff. And the head acolyte was the head acolyte, so he should have been able to do the consecration without any problem. And yet there was a problem, states Lux simply, and Freddy nods at that. Yeah, he tried to consecrate it, but that didn't work. Then he tried to attack Thedium, I think. That didn't work. Then you consecrated it just fine and he got mad. Then he tried to turn grim. Lux chuckles at the memory and nods. Do you know why the first try didn't work to consecrate it? Freddy just gives an awkward shrug. Not really. I know he did the wrong kind of consecration, but I don't really know much about doing that kind of thing yet, Freddy admits, and Lux simply nods. I've actually talked with the voice about that many times, because it's an interesting example of that wisdom I mentioned at the start of this. The consecration the acolyte tried was in the name of the shield, but that cemetery is part of Lord Thedium. Trying to dedicate it to the shield would be forming a pact with the shield, and Lord Thedium declined. Freddy looks confused at that. Why would he decline? Lux grins wide at that. Why would he decline? He fires back, wanting Freddy to think through his question. Freddy looks lost for a few moments as he tries to gather his thoughts and reconcile the idea of me and the shield being at odds. Thankfully he's not stupid, just inexperienced at thinking things through, but he gets there before too long. He's not against the shield, or he wouldn't be helping us train with his undead, and the head acolyte probably wouldn't have been allowed to leave the cemetery that day, so why wouldn't he pack the shield? Lux relaxes and gives Freddy the time to think it through, and after a few minutes the young orc brightens. Oh, what kind of pact was it? If it's anything like the Paladin Oaths, not everyone would want to take those. You don't have to be against the shield to not take those oaths. Rhonda is fine with the shield, but I don't think she'd even take the initiate vows, let alone the paladin ones. Freddy looks pretty confident, and Larks is looking pretty proud of the thought process. Exactly, Freddy. A bond is not to be taken lightly. While Lord Thadium holds no ill will towards the shield, he's not going to bind himself to it. So why was the acolyte so upset? Freddy looks like he's suffering a bit of second-hand embarrassment. Well, I don't think he really respected Thadium. I don't think he's done much delving, so he really only knew Neverrest, which didn't give him a very bright view on dungeons, I guess. When Thadium rejected the consecration because of the pact, he must have thought he had another threat in his hands and tried to attack with that exorcism. And even you, Freddy, seem to feel Lord Thadium would have been fully within his rights to strike him down on the spot. So why didn't he? Freddy takes much less time to start talking it out. Well, Thadium doesn't really do stuff like that. He's not against punishment and stuff, like with that one group that attacked Poe, but he only knocked them out, so he just doesn't like killing people. Freddy doesn't look too confident in that, so Larks motions for him to keep going. Why doesn't he like killing people? Freddy pauses at that. Miss Tellar said that dungeons gain a lot of power for killing, but Thadium doesn't do that. I mean, I know killing people is wrong. A dungeon can know that too. Larks laughs and nods. I wouldn't just worship any hole in the ground, would I? He asks, and Freddy shakes his head. Yeah, I guess not. So he didn't attack the acolyte because killing is wrong, and I think he wasn't really a threat. If the pact and the exorcism didn't work, I think the acolyte was pretty much out of tricks, even if he could have gotten special incense or whatever. And that's even without the fact that Grim is immune to turning. So, what can you learn from that? Freddy thinks for a few moments, chewing over the memories in a new light. Do not jump to conclusions about someone, or even if they are a someone. I never really thought about it, but Thadium really is aware, isn't he? I never thought dungeons were that smart. Larks just grins at him, and it takes Freddy a moment to realise he said he thought I was stupid right in the middle of a challenge I've given him. If I could, I'd be grinning too, and laughing as he tries to stammer out an apology. Thankfully, Larks calms him down and waves off the nervous stumbling over words. I think he knows what you meant, lad. I don't think he takes it personally either. Even the Dungeoneer's Guild seems to be caught by surprise by him and what he does, so he can hardly blame you for doing the same. But I have one more question for you, Freddy. What happened to the head acolyte? Well, he's just a normal acolyte now. Freddy pauses and mulls the question over, not even needing the prodding from Larks to examine the situation in more detail. The young orc's eyes widen once he makes a few connections. Wait, Headpriest Torlin asked him to consecrate the ceremony. It might not be a direct mission from the shield, but at least it's something it would want done, right? But the acolyte failed. You consecrated it, not the acolyte. I mean, it still got consecrated, but the acolyte still failed to do what the shield wanted. Freddy trails off for a moment, before glancing upward, and I can only assume he's trying to look towards the maze. Like Vernu failed to do what Thadium asked. Larks beams with pride, but doesn't say anything, not wanting to distract Freddy from his train of thought. They kinda both let their pride get in the way of doing their task, but the acolyte didn't get kicked out, he just lost some privileges. He still has some anger issues, I think, but he's also working to get past them, and I think Vernu will also work to do better too, like she promised. And what can you learn from that? And how does it relate to the wisdom I shared with you at the start? Don't get a big head just because someone important asks you to do something, and don't give up on someone if they fail. Larks nods and motions for him to continue, because it's easy to just say you forgive someone for something, but that's just noise. Giving them more chances is the action to let them change. I smile to myself at that. Freddy's a good kid, and I think he'll be a good paladin. I think no matter what kind of system or situation, the honor of a paladin is about actually doing good, not just saying it.